After a successful trip to Utah for UFC 307, the promotion returns back to their headquarters at the UFC Apex for back-to-back weekends of cards. First up, a flyweight matchup between former title challenger Brandon Royval as he takes on surging Japanese superstar Tatsuro Taira, who's looking for his 17th victory in as many fights. The co-main event features veteran Brad Tavares taking on the Iron Turtle Jung Young Park, but there are a ton of prospects on this card and a lot of good matchups just to see where these prospects are at and if they're ready to take the next step and if some other guys actually deserve to still be on the UFC roster. Now, a quick reminder that this is the quick picks version of the UFC Vegas 98 breakdowns. I dropped earlier this week a full card breakdown where I go in depth on every single matchup, whereas this segment is more so just getting right to the point so I can get these predictions out for you guys in 7 to 8 minutes, a lot more condensed than I normally do. But again, I'll be leaving out some details as to why I'm picking some of these guys. So if you want to know what those are, check out the MMA Lawcast, which I dropped earlier this week, or you can check in the description below for that link. Another quick plug. Octagon 62 goes down Saturday afternoon as an appetizer to UFC Vegas 98, and I'll have written breakdowns for all 11 fights scheduled for that card, strictly on the Patreon page for the MMA LOTN. Make sure you guys check it out. A link in the description below. All right. Hope you're laced up and ready to go because we're off and running with the first fight of the night. That goes down between prospects Clayton Carpenter and Lucas Rocha. I believe this is a great fight for Carpenter to go out there and showcase his grappling dominance where Rocha has shown issues in the past. Although Rocha has an impressive 17-1 record, you can see throughout his fights, even the ones that he wins, he does have issues dealing with guys that often are able to get his back and control him from that position. Look for Carpenter to grind this fight out and pick up his 8th win in as many fights. Next up, Dan Argueta going up against Cody Haddon. Argueta is looking to buck the trend of a tumultuous run that he's currently on, and he takes on UFC newcomer and recent Dana White Contender Series signee Cody Haddon. I believe Haddon has not faced the type of grapple-heavy approach he's going to be getting from the wrestler here in Argueta, and Argueta does a great job in terms of chaining his attempts together and showcasing a great gas tank to do it for 15 minutes if he needs to. If Argueta can avoid the striking-heavy approach of Haddon and the slick BJJ, I do believe he'll be able to keep Haddon on the defensive for the majority of this matchup and win it on the scorecards. Next up, Junior Tafa takes on short notice replacement Sean Sharaf. If you guys have been following me for a while, you know I'm not a big fan of Junior Tafa, and I think he's more overrated than anything. With only one victory in his UFC career thus far, which I believe he kind of cheated to get through with a big fence grab against Parker Porter, I do believe he's too big of a favorite here against Sharaf, who will more than likely engage with him in the striking realm and maybe even look to get this fight into the grappling realm. Sharaf is a longtime member of Extreme Couture, training alongside Francis Ngannou, Sergey Spivak, and Carl Williams, and I believe he'll be able to showcase that experience and the level of training partners when he takes on Tafa. Look for Sharaf to bite down on the mouthpiece, exchange in the pocket a little bit, but showcase a much better mixed martial arts approach and pull off the upset here. Next up, Julia Polastri going up against Corey McKenna. Polastri has been improving her game ever since losing on the 2021 season of the Contender Series against Chaz Davicius. The biggest improvement I think she made is the fact that she actually went down to 115 pounds and fighting women that are closer to her size, and I think that we'll see that pay off for her here as she stops the majority of grappling attempts from McKenna and batter her on the feet, maybe even have some grappling success of her own. But I do think Polastri will land the more damaging blows and have the more eye-catching shots to get her hand raised on the scorecards. Next up, Themba Gorimbo going up against Nico Price, and I have to be honest, this was one of the lines that kind of surprised me as to why it's so wide. Although Gorimbo is on a 3-fight winning streak in the UFC, I do not think he is all that good. I think Nico Price has enough veteran experience here that if he can have his durability hold up early, it's going to be hard for Gorimbo to go out there and grind him out just as he did against Brahimaj last time. Look for Price to keep this competitive and start pulling away late, as I do think he has the better gas tank, and I think that eventually leads to a second or third round finish for the big underdog here in Nico Price. Next up, Jonathan Pearce going up against Pat Sabatini. Jonathan Pearce is on a 2-fight losing streak, but I do have to give him credit for how good he looked in his last fight, even in defeat against David Onama. I think that we'll see him utilize his defensive grappling here so that he can go out there and put a pace on Sabatini in the striking realm where Sabatini does not look all that comfortable. Look for Pearce to keep this fight upright, push a pace on Sabatini, eventually break him, and finish him in the second or third round. Next up, CJ Vergara going up against UFC newcomer Ramazan Bek Temirov. I believe Temirov is just a much better version of Vergara. Both guys normally leaning on the striking, and I do think that Temirov is a little bit more explosive, a little bit faster, and a little bit better with his footwork, cutting angles, and utilizing that to crash the pocket and catch his opponents off guard. Look for him to land his big strikes and eventually find a knockout here over Vergara within the first 2 rounds. Next up, Abdul Razak Alhassan going up against Josh Fremd. I normally like fading the style of Alhassan, which is round 1 or bust, but I have not been impressed with Fremd as of late, and I don't think he'll be able to contain Alhassan early here, allowing Alhassan to walk him down and stalk him, eventually landing those big shots to put him out early. I would rather take round 1 KO Alhassan than the chalky price on Alhassan at -150. Next up, Daniel Rodriguez versus Alex Morono in a fight that should prove to be a striker's delight. Although both guys aren't, Israel Adesanya in the striking realm, I do think that Rodriguez is a little bit more well-rounded and a little bit more technical. Morono does a good job with utilizing his footwork, but I think he'll struggle with the counters and the straight shots down the pipe of Rodriguez. I think Rodriguez will do a good job in terms of walking Morono down, landing his big strikes, and winning this fight on the scorecards. Next up, Grant Dawson going up against Rafa Garcia. Dawson does not care to entertain folks, and that might not help his longevity inside the UFC, but it will still help him go out there and get wins no matter what. And I expect him to do that once again, just exactly what he did to Joe Solecki last time around. He might face some adversity here with Garcia being able to stop the first couple takedowns, but Dawson has a great gas tank, and I think that will eventually wear on Garcia, allowing Dawson to pull off a classic Dawson decision. Next up, Chidi Njokuani going up against Jared Gooden. Very fun striking matchup here. Njokuani just a little bit slicker and very difficult to deal with, especially with a height and reach advantage he'll normally have over his opponents. I think at welterweight, this is a great spot for him, or a great division for him to compete in. As long as the weight cut does not drain his durability too much, he should do a good enough job in terms of keeping the power punching style of Gooden at bay. Look for kicks up the middle and straight shots down the pipe for Njokuani to keep Gooden at distance, and from there he should be able to pick him apart and win this fight on the scorecards. Next up, co-main event, Brad Tavares going up against Jun Young Park. Tavares on a little bit of a rough run as he is 1-3 in his last 4 fights, but I think this is a very winnable matchup for him, especially if he can keep it in the striking realm. I think Park has some decent power in his hands, but I don't think it's enough to catch Tavares slacking, and I think we'll see Tavares land the better strikes, land some good leg kicks, stop the takedowns, and land the better shots over the course of 15 minutes, winning this fight on the scorecards. And that brings us to our main event between Brandon Royval and Tatsuro Taira. I was looking for a reason to take a shot on Royval as the big underdog here, but I just can't get to the window considering the type of control and grappling we've seen from Taira in the past. Royval is taking a little bit more of a disciplined approach as we saw in his last fight against Morono, but I think he's still going to struggle with Taira as he crashes the pocket and continuously wraps him up and gets him into compromising positions. I'm not super high on the chalk on Taira here, and I actually like the over 3.5 more than anything, but I think we're going to see Taira controlling the majority of this matchup by getting it into the grappling realm and sticking to Royval like glue. Look for Taira to win this fight on the scorecards, but again, the over 3.5 probably the best way to go about it. There you guys go. Quick picks for UFC Vegas 98. Appreciate all the love. Appreciate all the support. I'll be back tomorrow for the free parlay as well as the top 3 prop bets for UFC Vegas 98. I'll see you guys then. Peace.